Let's dive right in. I've already opened up Photoshop, and I'm going to get my image by going to File, Open. I've saved mine into this folder called Pumpkins, and I've named it Pumpkin Patch. You can see right away that the image is very different from what we're going to end up with after we've worked on it for a while. What's jumping out at me right away is this word, these words, the pumpkin patch. We're going to use one of Adobe's most powerful tools to get rid of those words. That's the Spot Healing Brush. It's right here about a quarter of the way down the toolbar. And it's nested with these other tools, the Healing Brush, the Patch tool, the Content Aware Move tool, and the Red Eye tool. You might see one of those there instead. If you left click with the mouse and hold, it'll show you your other options. So choose the Spot Healing Brush. Just like the brush or the eraser tool, you can use the bracket keys to increase or decrease the size of the Spot Healing Brush. I'm going to make it just about the size of the words, and I'm going to click and drag across the words. And you can see that Adobe does some calculations in the background and figure out what should be behind those words. And it does a pretty good job, especially for a background like this that's kind of noisy and jumbled and not too specific. And the fact of the matter is that people probably wouldn't be able to tell that there's anything there to begin with. So it's a really cool tool that Adobe provides for getting things out of the foreground and just having the background. Our next step is to take this scene and make it look a little bit more Halloween-y. It's very bright. It's obviously daytime in the photo, which is great because everything's nice and bright, but it's not going to work for what we're trying to accomplish. The first thing I'm going to do is duplicate the background layer. It's always a good idea to keep a background layer there in case something goes wrong. And it actually starts off locked, so you can't do anything to it anyway. So I'm going to duplicate it by right-clicking on it, selecting Duplicate. I'm going to call this new layer Main. I'm going to be doing a lot of work on this main layer. The next thing I'm going to use are what's called adjustment layers. You'll find them up here. An adjustment layer sits on top of your already existing layers, and it changes all the layers below it somehow. This will save you a lot of work sometimes. If I had 5 or 6 layers and I wanted to darken all of them, for example, instead of having to go through each individual layer and darken that layer, I just put an adjustment layer on top of all of them and darken it. It would make things a lot simpler and save myself a lot of time by doing that. I'm going to be adding several adjustment layers in a row. In the end, it's up to you to decide how much and how little you want to darken the scene to get the effect that you want to have. So the first one I'm going to add is going to be what's called a levels adjustment layer. So I go to Adjustments, click on Levels. And what I'm going to do, here's my levels. I'm going to take this little black slider, move it to the right. And you see it's going to start darkening the scene. But I don't like the way that the orange is really starting to come out, and look, it's looking very oversaturated. So I'm going to add a second adjustment layer called a hue saturation adjustment layer. And I'm going to turn the saturation down a little bit. It's going to take some of the color out so it's not quite so saturated in orange. I'm going to move this hue over just a little bit to get some of the sort of light orange to come back. I'm going to scroll down and I'm going to make the lightness a little bit less. So I'm still darkening the scene. I'm going to bring my saturation back up just a little bit so I get some more orange back. Okay, the next adjustment layer I'm going to add is going to be a brightness contrast. I'm going to lower the brightness and up the contrast a little bit. Okay, we're getting there. Now what I want to do is I want to tackle the sky here, because everything is starting to look sort of nighttimey and dark and sort of creepy, but the sky is still very bright, and that's gonna mess with the overall tone of the scene. So I'm going to grab the rectangular marquee tool. It's right up here, and it's nested with the elliptical and these other marquee tools. So you might see one of those instead. Just left click and hold, select the rectangular marquee tool, and draw a rectangle that encompasses just sort of the upper part of the picture. It's okay if you get a little bit of the pumpkins in there, you won't even really notice. Now I'm going to go back to my adjustments panel, and this time when I go to make an adjustment, it's only going to affect the part that I have selected. So I'm going to do this one called exposure. And you'll see that the exposure adjustment layer has what's called a mask on it. So in this mask, it's telling me that any part in black is not going to be affected by what I'm about to do. Only the part in white, which is the part at the very top of the screen. And that's what I want. So I'm going to turn the exposure down. I'm going to take the gamma over to the right a little bit. And let's try the offset a little bit. I'm going to turn that down just a little bit. And I end up getting this sort of much more sinister, dark-looking image. And that's much closer in line with what I want to do. So the next part is to actually start carving our jack-o'-lantern. Now it's time to do some carving. To do that, I'm going to use the pen tool, which is about 2/3 of the way down the toolbar, and it's nested with these tools. Okay, there are several settings I want to check to make sure before I begin carving. First of all, this needs to be set on shape and not path. Path will not do what we're trying to do here. We're actually going to be creating shapes. The fill, I would make sure is set to a yellow color. And make sure inside of here that we're selected on new layer. That means that this shape will be made on a new layer. Then what I would do if I were you is I would stop and I would Google jack-o'-lantern faces, because there are lots of really good websites and images that will show you some interesting jack-o'-lantern faces, and I would use one as a guide. You can be as simple or as creative as you want to make your jack-o'-lantern either more fun or sort of more sinister. Once you're ready, you'll simply take the pen tool and begin to actually click to make your shapes. I'm going to finish by clicking on the first point that I made. And you'll see it's created a new shape layer on top of my other layers. Now what I'm going to do to keep things sort of very consistent is I'm going to duplicate this layer. Now there are two of them. I can grab the Move tool, and while I have this top layer selected, I can drag it over here. Now that doesn't look quite right, so I'm going to go ahead and do Edit, and I'm going to come down to Transform Path and do Flip Horizontal. Now I know that I have two eyes that are the exact same size. Okay. In order to move them, I need to make sure I have the correct layer selected. So I will go ahead and click on this one, and then I can move that layer to move the eyes either further apart or closer together. At this point, I'm going to stop, and I'm going to finish carving out my face. There's no need for you to watch me do that. It might take you a few tries to get this the way you want it to, and that's totally fine. If you don't like what you've done, you can really just click on it and press Delete, and that layer will go away. So I'll be right back. This is what I came up with. I was trying to work pretty quick to save time, but you should probably take a little bit more time and make sure it looks really nice. And you'll see what I have over here is I have 4 different shape layers. And once I'm done and I've got them the way I want them to, that's going to be sort of hard to work with. So I'm going to go ahead and click on the top one. I'm going to hold down Shift to click on the last one to get them all selected. I'm going to right click. I'm going to say Merge Shapes. So I end up with one single shape. I'm going to rename that and call it Face. And now I have a single layer that has all of my shapes on it. All that's left to do now is to add what are called layer styles, and they take a layer and they change the way it looks. We'll be working with the face layer so that we can get some more dynamic effects out of the carving. Right now it looks pretty flat and kind of fake. The way to add a layer style is to go to Layer, Layer Style, and we're going to be using several here. We're going to be doing the inner glow, outer glow, bevel and emboss, and we're going to be doing the gradient overlay. So what's going to happen next is on the next few slides, I'm going to show you screenshots of what it should look like once you click on these. For example, the first one we're going to do is going to be outer glow. And I'm going to take a screenshot of this box here pointing out the things that you need to change. For example, the first one, we need to change this to normal. We need to set the color here. You set a color by double-clicking on it. This box will pop up, and what I'm going to do is give you the hexadecimal code for each color. That goes in right here. For our first color, it's going to be FE6151. That gives me a nice red color. I press OK. And I think I'm just going to change the size here to 10 pixels. And I'm getting a little preview over here. This is going to add this sort of red glowy effect. Like it said, outer glow. I'm going to press OK. And I have a soft red outer glow around the shapes. I'm going to stop now, and I'm going to show you all 4 layer styles on the next slide and give you screenshots of the settings you need to change. So if you've been following along, you should now have the outer glow, inner glow, bevel, and emboss effects on. We're going to add one more, but it's a little bit trickier, so I want to make sure that everyone's clear on how it works, so we'll do it together. This one's called the gradient overlay. So I'm going to go up to layer, we're going to go to layer style, we're going to gradient overlay. Now, first thing we're going to do is change this to radial. We're going to double click inside this box right here, inside the gradient box, and that brings this up. We're going to change several of these. So what I'm going to do right now is this little box down here, I'm going to click on it, double click, and I'm going to change it to FFFECB. I'm going to turn this last one by double clicking to AC0701. I'm going to make a new stop in here by double clicking right about there. I'm going to tell it to be FFD90C. I'm going to press OK. This stop's location should be, I was close, it should be 65, which I can change right there. What we're telling this to do is we're telling it to start as sort of a pale yellow, gradually go into an orange, into a deep red, and we're telling it at what level, how quickly to do that. So I said 65. I'm going to press OK. I have radial gradient selected. This should say 90. And I think everything else is as it should be, so I'll press OK. And that's how I get that sort of candlelight effect inside. It looks like it's yellow where the candle should be and goes out to a more orangey color as it goes out further. And I get, the face looks much more sinister now and much more jack-o'-lantern-esque. So we've done all that we can do in Adobe Photoshop. Now we're going to move over to Adobe After Effects, which is a program that's centered around making visual effects and animations and things of that sort. So I've opened up Adobe After Effects. I've gone to File and done a new project. And now I need to start what's called a new composition. So I go to Composition, New Composition. Let's call it Jack-o'-lantern. We're going to leave most of these the same. I would say we can change the duration. And we're not going to have a 30-second video. We're going to have a 10-second video. Everything else can stay the same. We'll press OK. Now we need to import the picture that we just created. So up in this area, I'm going to right-click and import a file. I named mine Pumpkin Patch Video. Keep it on merged layers. It's going to take all the layers that we had created and merge them into one. So it shows up here in our Assets window. And I need to drag it down into our actual composition window. And what it's done is it's actually added our picture into the composition. And now we have a 10-second video that is just a static, unchanging image of our video. If I press the space bar, we can see the time move and nothing's changing. So we have several things that we're trying to add here. We're going to be adding fog, rain, the glowing effect of the jack-o'-lantern, the text that says Happy Halloween, and perhaps even some lightning flashes and sound at the end. So we're going to add the glow effect first. I've used the Control and plus keys to zoom in on the face. I can also use the hand tool to move around the scene. So what we're going to do is we're going to add a glow effect, but I don't want to add a glow effect to the entire image or the entire layer. Rather, I only want the glow effect to affect these parts of the face that should actually be glowing. To do that, I'm going to use a mask. You'll recall that we used a mask previously when we only wanted to darken one part of the image, which was the sky. We created a mask, and we were able to change the exposure of just that area of the image. We're going to do something very similar here so that we only affect this part of the face when we do the glow effect. First thing I need to do is click on my layer. I'm going to press Control-D to duplicate that layer. So now I have two. On this top one, I'm going to right-click and rename it. And we're going to call this layer the glow layer. Now, to make a path or a mask in After Effects, we use the pen tool, much in the same way we use the pen tool to carve the face to begin with. So I'm going to click that, and I'm going to trace the face as close as I can. Don't forget, when you're going around the eyes and nose, to bring the pen back to the first point, or else you're going to get some very strange shapes. I can always come back once I've finished a shape and adjust the anchor points to make sure I get it exactly how I want it. I'm going to press enter, and it's going to create my mask. So it's showing me right now that the only part of my image that's going to be affected by what I do to this layer are the pieces that you can see, which is the face. Right now I'm actually looking at just this one layer. If I switch back to composition up here, I can once again see my entire image. Over in the effects and presets, I'm going to search for the word glow, which brings up a single stylized effect. And I'm just going to grab it. I need to get my pen tool back. I'm sorry, my select tool back. And drag it over right onto the glow layer here. What's going to happen is right away you can see that a glow effect has been applied, and this has popped up. The effect controls have popped up. There are several parts of the effect that I can change. Things like the threshold, the radius, which is how much of a glow it's creating, the intensity of the glow. And I can just click and drag with my mouse in order to change those. So in the next part of the presentation, I'm going to show you how to set those settings at certain points. So we might start at the 0 seconds with the glow being fairly small. But at 2 seconds, the glow should be much brighter. Then by 6 seconds, it should be low again. And that will create that pulsing effect that you saw in the example. Now we're going to actually start animating this glow effect. We're going to do that by using our timeline and by adding what are called keyframes. Keyframes are specific points during the animation where you want certain values to be at certain levels. So, at the start of the animation at the 0 second mark, I've set my threshold to 50%, the glow radius to 2, and the intensity to 2. I'm going to go ahead and click all three of these little stopwatches, to create keyframes. I'm going to move my marker to the 2 second mark. And I'm going to change these values. I'm going to turn the threshold down. I'm going to turn the radius up and the intensity up. Then I'm going to come to the 4 second mark. I'm going to turn them back down to the original values. So we're going to go to 50% for the threshold, and 2 for each of these. Then, at the 6 second mark, we're going to go back again. This was down to 20%. This was at 21. And we'll just call this 10. Now let's take this back. I'm going to press the space bar. And you can see that all those values are changing based on what we told them to change to. A better way to even visualize this is by clicking on the graph editor right here. And what's happening is all three of my values, this one is glow threshold, this one is glow radius, this one is glow intensity. You can see how they're changing over time. So the glow threshold started at 50, but I told it at the 2 second mark I wanted it to be at 13.92. Let's change that to, let's make these even, at 20%, The glow intensity started at 2 units and got up to 21. Let's put that down to 20. And this graph shows you the intensity of the effect over time. Let's add some more points on our graph. I'm going to grab the pen tool, and if I click anywhere on the glow threshold path, it adds a new one for me. I can then switch to my selection tool and move it over. And so at the 8-second mark, I'm going to want it to be back here. And at the 10-second final mark, it'll be back down to there. I'll do the same thing for my other values. So I'm going to go ahead and add a couple of points on this, a couple of points on that. We're going to pull this point down to here. And this point will finish right there. I need to even out this glow radius. So the glow radius starts at 2, then it goes up to, let's have it go up to 10, then back down to 2, then up to 10, down to 2, back up to 10. And I just want to make sure everything's equal, so this will come back down. And let's take a look. I'll take the marker, slide it back to 0, and press spacebar. And you can follow the marker and see how each value is changing. So as the threshold goes down, the intensity and the radius come up. Once it hits the 10-second mark, it kind of gets a little blip there because it goes all the way back to the beginning, and the values aren't the same. But it looks pretty nice. I'm going to do one more thing to sort of even out the way the glow moves, and that is I'm going to select all of the markers in here by clicking and dragging. Actually, let me start over here. Make sure I get them all. And I'm going to hit this button right here called, which one is it? I think Easy Ease. And you see what it does there? It actually makes things, instead of being kind of jerky, going straight down, it levels them off a little bit. And then when I press the space bar, it's not quite as sudden when it hits the top and comes back down. It levels off and eases in and out of whatever effect we're going for. Let's add some fog. And now that you know what you're doing, this actually won't be that hard. We're going to go ahead and click in the composition, right-click, and do a new solid. Call it fog. Set it as black. Press OK. Okay, it's going to cover our whole screen for now, but we're going to fix that in just a second by using another layer mask. So I'm going to right-click on the fog and say New Mask. Remember, when I put a mask on, I'm telling it how much I actually want it to show of this new layer. And we're only going to be doing the bottom portion of this. So I'm going to press Control and T, Control T, so that I can drag this down. And I'm just going to cover the bottom part of the screen. So that's the only part of the solid you'll be able to see thanks to our layer mask. Next, I'm going to go search for an effect called fractal noise. When I find it, I'm going to click on it and drag it over to my new fog layer. And you can see the kind of effect that it creates and how it's almost fog looking. Let's change some of the settings up here to make it look even more like fog. I'm going to change from basic to dynamic progressive. I'm going to change from soft linear to spline. I'm going to invert it. I'm going to turn the contrast up a bit, the brightness down a bit. And we're getting closer. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to actually come down into the mask we created. So down the fog layer, inside the mask. And I'm going to find the opacity. And I'm going to bring that way down. So I start to only see the little bright spots, and it looks a little bit more like fog. Let's go with around 35%. Now let's animate it. So I have my marker at the 0, 0 point. I'm going to click a couple of these stopwatches. I'm going to click the offset turbulence, which is under transform, and I'm going to set the evolution. Then I'm going to move the marker all the way to the very end, the 10-second mark. And I'm going to change the offset turbulence by however much I want the fog to have moved from the start to the finish. Personally, I don't think it looks very good if the fog is moving very, very quickly. So I'm just going to move it a little bit so that over the course of the 10 seconds, it moves across the screen at a very slow pace. So I'm going to go up to about 100 on that. I'm going to change the evolution right here where it says 0 times to 1. Now let's go back to 0. I'm going to click off that layer and I'm going to press the space bar to watch what we have here. Okay, I can see how it's moving slowly. The evolution means it's kind of pulsating a little bit, and I like that a lot. What I don't love is this very hard line up here. I can see where the fog stops, and it's just way too sharp. So that's pretty easy to fix, actually. I'm going to come right back over here to my mask, and I'm going to feather the mask right here. And watch what happens when I move this slider from 0. I'm going to move it up to about 65. I'm going to click off that so I can see it better. And now when I press play, the lines up here aren't nearly as defined. That's called feathering. Feathering takes a straight line and sort of makes it less straight, which comes across much, much more natural. Let's go ahead and add some rain. I'm going to minimize all of these little windows I've opened up right there. I'm going to right click and do a new adjustment layer, which I'm going to right click on, and I'm going to rename that rain. I'm going to come over to my effects preset and search for rain. I think I'm actually looking for CC rainfall. I'm going to take that, drop it on the rain layer, excuse me, and then you can see I have several things that I can tweak here. If I just press play now, you see the effect that we get. I personally like it if it's a little bit less, a little bit fewer drops. I like to put some wind in, and what that does is it actually sort of turns it sideways. I think the rain looks more interesting that way. That's just me. But you'll see there's all kinds of things you can change here. The size of the drops, the speed they're falling at, the color they are. So go ahead and play with some things, and that's all you need to do for the rain. Let's take what we've learned and add some lightning. I'm going to right-click in the composition window and add a new adjustment layer. I'm going to right-click on it and rename it lightning. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to search for a preset called levels. And when I find it, I'm going to drop it onto lightning. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to move my marker over to where I want the lightning flash to begin. So I'll go somewhere in between 2 and 3 seconds. And I'm going to click the stopwatch next to histogram. Then I'm going to take my marker. I'm going to zoom in a little bit by coming down here and just moving this over a little bit. It's just going to make my timeline a little bit bigger and easier for me to use. I'm going to move the marker over a little bit, just a little bit, a few parts of a second. And I'm going to change the histogram. I'm going to move this arrow way over. I'm going to come down to this arrow and move it way over. Something like that. I'm going to move this over a few more parts of a second, something like this. And I'm going to move them back. Okay, so let's move the marker back and press spacebar to see how it looks. It's actually pretty good. Sometimes, if you put this too close to the first one, the lightning flash looks like it happens too quickly. So you can always adjust these keyframes by moving them like this. That's too long. I think it stayed bright for too long there. So I'm going to bring this back. All right, I like that. Now what I can do is I can click and drag around these three keyframes, press Control C to copy, and move my marker where I want a different lightning strike to be. So let's see over here around the 4.5 second mark and press Control V. And then I'm going to come right after that second one and do another one because I like it when I have two lightning strikes right in a row. So let's watch this. Yeah, I like that a lot. So if you look at the graph here, what's happening is that nothing is happening until we get to this mark. And then we sort of set the levels at their normal values. And then right after that, we pumped them way up. And that's when we get the flash. Then, part of a second later, we made a new keyframe where we bring levels back down to 0. And that's how we simulate this lightning flash. We're just about there. Let's go ahead and throw some text on here. So I'm going to right-click in the composition window and say New Text. I'm going to start typing here the words Happy Halloween. Now, I've already picked my sort of Halloween-y looking font, and I've installed 3 or so Halloween type fonts on the computer. This one is called CF12 Trees. Other good ones include, let me select it, other ones include one called Burton's Dreams. Another one I like is called, that's Tim Burton, by the way, who makes things like The Nightmare Before Christmas. And one called, let me see, this one always gets me. This one's called JF Wildwood. So I got to type in JF Wildwood. That one works too. I'm going to stick with the CF12 Trees. I'm going to grab my select arrow. I'm going to move it up a little bit. I can take these handles and resize it if I'd like to. I can also change the font over here to do the same thing. And the last thing I want to do is I want to make it so this font only pops on the screen when the lightning strikes. So I'm going to switch off of the graph editor, which we've been in for most of this project now. And now I just see all the layers and when they start. Right now they all start right at the 0 mark. I'm going to click on the lightning layer. I'm going to press the U key. And that's going to show me the keyframe. So here's the first lightning strike, second lightning strike, and third lightning strike. If I drag my marker over, I can actually see that. As I drag it there, there's that lightning strike, second strike, and there is the third strike. At the brightest part of the last strike, I'm going to take it and I'm going to drag my Happy Halloween layer, the whole thing, so that it does not start until that moment. So if I move backwards now, you don't see Happy Halloween because that layer is not supposed to start until this exact moment. So if I bring this back and press the spacebar to view, there it goes. It pops up with that third strike. That's a very nice effect. In case you'd like some spooky music to go along with that, you can come into your Assets window here, and we're going to import a file. I went and downloaded something that was sort of spooky. There are actually plenty of sites that will let you download MP3s of spooky music, but you find the MP3 you want. It's going to import it into your Assets window. Now just come and drag it down to the composition window, and it's going to start from the very beginning, and it'll play throughout. And now you won't actually hear the music when you just press spacebar, because After Effects doesn't automatically play the music. When we go to create the video from this, we'll be able to actually include the music with it. If I want to get a preview of what it looks like and sounds like, I need to come up here to the preview button and press RAM Preview. That will actually give me a full-fledged simulation with music. Just like that. We're in the home stretch. Now it's just time to take what we've done and make it into a video that can be played on pretty much any computer. Right now, when we save, we're saving an After Effects file. It's kind of like saving a Photoshop file. Only people with the same program would be able to view it, and that won't work for us. So what we're going to do is go to Composition, and we're going to do Add to Render Queue. Now this is going to pop up down here in our timeline. We could always come back, by the way, with these tabs. and there are a few settings we need to change. So let's go to the render settings, and quality best, great. Resolution full, that sounds fine. I'm just going to press OK. Output module, going to click on that. I have found I have much better luck on our computers if I switch from AVI format down to MPEG-4. So I suggest you do that. Press OK. It's going to say output to, and this is you telling it where you want it to go and what you want it to be called. So I would suggest you put it in your S drive or somewhere safe, give it a name, press save, and when you're ready, you're going to press the render button. And this little progress bar will inch across the right-hand side of the screen. When it's done, you should have a file in that folder that's your finished video. Don't forget to save the After Effects project as well, so you can come back and work on it, or if you find something that you want to change, it'll still be there. But good job sticking with it, and I hope you like your product, and good job.